I'm Jolie, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to show you how to make these pair of Mickey ears. They're Coco inspired. Now we used to sell Mickey ears on Etsy for a few years. These were actually some of our first pair of ears. These are one of our first designs, and they actually were one of the most popular designs because they have a really cool special feature, and I don't know that you'll be able to see it right now. I'll turn off the light, but they glow. They have a little light inside. You can see them poking through. They glow in the dark, or they light up. So in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make them. I have a pattern linked in the description as well, which will give you the pattern for the ears as well as the foam centerpiece inside the ears. And I'll walk you through the whole thing step by step so that you can make these for yourself. Here are the supplies that I used. This is the fabric that I picked up from Walmart. I've seen it at a few different stores. I think Joann's has a slightly different version of this that is basically the same. I think the background, instead of it being black, is a little bit more of an olive color, if I'm not mistaken. But this has been sold at Walmart for a long time. I love all of the color that is used, and obviously the characters as well on this fabric. I'm also going to use a white satin headband. Now, my headbands I buy off of Amazon, and anything that I buy off of Amazon I do have linked in my Amazon storefront. We do need a lot of glue for this one, and I recommend the Gorilla Glue sticks. It's the higher, it gives you a really good bond. Now, these flowers I picked up at Walmart. Right now it is currently entering into the fall season, at least according to the stores. So all of the fall flowers are out, which is a great time to purchase these. I've always found the best deals on them at Walmart. This one's a mum bush, and then the other one is like mum bush and berries. But they have a bunch of different orange flowers right now, and they're all pretty cheap, around like 99 cents for each bush. The great thing about these is that they're really easy to pop off and remove from the stem. Now, for the lights for these, I use these little twinkle lights, these little fairy lights, also linked in my Amazon storefront. And it comes in a pack, a big pack, and it also includes like a screwdriver if you need to like replace any batteries. I've never have these, don't, stay on a whole, they're not staying on forever. So I've never had to replace them, but the way I do it here, the battery pack, it is to where you could still remove it and replace the battery if you ever need to. They do also come in different colors. I like this kind of white, or kind of more yellow light rather than like an orange for this. Even though orange is good in theory, it kind of tends to be a darker light and not as noticeable. But with the orange of the flowers, you're still going to get that nice orange glow to it. And then for the inside of the ears, I stuffed them with polyfill. This is just their regular fiber foam. These bags will last you forever, and the best deal that I usually find, unless they're on sale, is Hobby Lobby. They tend to have them cheaper than some of the other stores. I also am currently using this EVA foam. This one is a 3mm. I've used different sizes before. My preferred size is 6mm, and when you use a 6mm foam, you only need, I like only using 2. But really the size of the foam doesn't matter. It's up to your preference, and it also just will vary how many inserts you're going to end up needing. You'll see when I get to it. Now, I've also linked in my description these patterns for cutting and sewing both the fabric, which is right here. You're going to start here and sew along the edge and stop there. And then these are the foam centerpieces. If you're using 6mm foam, I recommend using 2 of those per ear, so a total of 4 per headband. You will see in a little bit I will use a total of 6 for this since it's a thinner foam. I do recommend printing these out on cardstock just because it's easier to use the same template over and over. rather than printing them on paper, but that pattern is linked and is completely free for you to use. That's about it as far as supplies go. Obviously, different tools for sewing and cutting fabric and whatnot will also be useful. Now this is the first tutorial that I've done on here that has like a patterned fabric. Obviously we've got multiple characters on here and multiple different aspects to the design. And so usually when I cut my fabric, I basically cut out squares. I draw the circle around, but I cut out squares and size them all together. And also I tend to have like the fabric doubled up. That is just to conserve or be strategic with my fabric usage. In something like this, where it's a designed pattern, I have to take that into account. So there is a lot of fabric, a lot more fabric that I'm going to go through with this and kind of not really be able to use anything else with them. They're going to be odd shaped scraps. That's just a part of it when you're working with a pattern fabric, because obviously here using the space provided, using the fabric in a strategic way is not as important as the design. The design is going to be the most important part. So here I am starting with Ernesto, and I want to make sure that as I'm placing these down, I'm getting the characters centered. Because obviously I want them centered on my ears, especially because this one is going to have a large flower crown, and the flowers can sometimes like cover over, especially the bottom part of the ears. So I do kind of make sure they're kind of centered, but a little bit more towards the top, but also keeping in mind that I don't want it too close to the top because it will end up wrapping around. So you'll see. And I just really take my time making sure my placement is where I want it. Now for this fabric, I am using a Sharpie to write on this. You could use a bunch of different methods for marking this. You can use like a chalk or a fabric marker. You're not gonna see it on this on the other side because it's a dark fabric, but this is like one of the only ones that I don't like use a pencil for, just because it's with the texture of the cotton and all the colors and stuff, it's kind of hard to see the pencil line. So anyways, I just opt for a Sharpie for these. Now as you see, I've drawn out 2 circles. These are all the circles that I will draw out because obviously they're going to be sandwiched together. Like I don't need to draw the sewing line on each side because I'm only going to, see one side while I'm sewing. So for these other 2 pieces, I'm going to just kind of figure out placement with my template and then just cut around it. The placement of them as a whole is going to be more important when I sandwich the 2 pieces together, which you'll see here in a minute. But here is also kind of every pattern that you use, or every fabric that has like a design on it like this, it's gonna all be laid out differently, and you just kind of have to, I'm trying to make sure that I get all the characters, all 4 characters, but also really, like here I have an opportunity to show Miguel on more than one ear because he's kind of close to Mama Imelda on this one, in this one section. So I'm gonna obviously opt to have 2 Miguels on the ear. So, it's just really playing around with it. You also could center one of the ears around more of the like flowers if you like that, or like the candle or something like that. But I like to focus them on the characters. And then also this one is odd for some reason. Hector there's like 2 different sizes of Hector. There's like a smaller one and then a slightly bigger one. So I'm obviously going to pick the slightly bigger version of Hector so that he's more prominent on the ear. And that way I basically have each ear and side of the ear is really centered around one of the characters. So this is where you can see, like, obviously I'm cutting randomly on the fabric rather than really you know, being strategic with my usage of the fabric. Because obviously, like, now I'm not going to be able to make like a scrunchie with this area of it, or I'm not going to be able to, you know, use this part that has half of Ernesto's face cut through it. Like, you know, you're going to go through more fabric is what I'm getting at when you're working with a patterned fabric as opposed to just like a plain color. So yeah, just something to keep in mind as you make your own ears as well. A good practice with sewing things is to really conserve your materials, and that's something that certain fabric, it's easier to do that than others. Hopefully all that rambling made sense. So now I'm going to put the two pieces together, basically, both of the ears. So like I said before, I've only drawn on a circle on two pieces, and I have a total of 4. So now I need to place them to where they match and line up. And in doing that, I also kind of like to plan ahead on like which characters I want on the front of my ears and which characters I want on the back. So I want Miguel on the front, but here I stopped myself and realized that I had the fabric facing the wrong way. So for this, the bottom piece, basically both sides, the good sides of the fabric need to be touching each other. I had it flipped, so that would have been a big mistake if I had not caught that and sewn it. So I like to just really make sure, that the characters are like on top of each other, making sure they're also facing the same way. Hopefully I'm making sense with this. I feel like I'm making it sound more complicated than it is, but I feel like you'll be able to make sense of this. But yeah, so I just like to make sure the characters are lined up, and then I cut off a little bit of the excess, not getting too close to really the pattern at all, but also the bottom part, which is where the opening is, where we won't be sewing. I like to make sure I have extra fabric on that end, because eventually I will be folding that over and closing it up. So moving on to the next ear, I have Ernesto, and then I have Mama Imelda and Miguel. I know everyone does that. So here I'm trying to figure out like which way I want up. I don't want them facing upside down. I've done that before. And again, just trying to really see where the center will be and matching up these two. Obviously, it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm not making the like pattern completely meet up like where my seam is or anything like that. I'm just only concerned with what's on the center of the ear, really, because that's all you're going to really pay attention to. So again, I'm going to just pin this so that I keep these together, and then trim off some of the excess fabric so that I'm ready to sew. Now moving on to the foam inserts. Now this again is the EVA foam. Right now I'm using a roll of it, which as you see is kind of warped because it's a roll. It probably would be useful to straighten it out, to flatten it out before using this, stick it under something for a couple days. I have yet to do that, but it'll be fine. So for this thickness, this is a 3mm. I'm going to use a total of 6 of my foam centerpiece inserts. This will be 3 for each ear. Now, why do I use this foam? This is going to create the structure. This is going to give your ears the structure. I could just stuff it all with polyfill, but then it might be floppy and it won't, it's just not going to stand up as well as this. This is going to provide my ear with structure and support, and also will help with adhering it to the headband, because it's going to give the headband a nice base. This bottom curve right there, that's going to go right up to your headband. And with having this essentially flat, obviously it's curved, but you know what I mean, flat surface to stick to the headband. So this step is really important as well. But as far as what size foam you use, or however many you use. It's really up to you. This is just my personal preference. Again, I also usually use 6mm foam. That's harder to find in person. This roll my husband found at Hobby Lobby, so that's why I'm using it. But I do have 6mm foam linked in my Amazon storefront as well. And the only thing to keep in mind with all of this is that everything that you add to it, even though this foam is, you know, lightweight, it is also still just adding bulk to the ear. So, you know, it's a fine balance between giving your ear enough support and not having it kind of lose, not balance, but you know, you don't want to bend over, to tilt your head over and your ears to fall off because of the weight. So that's just something to keep in mind, and it's completely up to personal preference here. But I am going to cut along the shape that I've drawn out, the pattern that I have, and I'm going to cut that out on all 6 of these and then set them aside for when it's time to stuff the ear. Now moving on to sewing, I am going to use black thread for this. The thread doesn't really matter. You're not going to see it, especially with this black fabric. You're not going to see through it. But I always just choose a thread that is similar. If it's a dark fabric, I use black. If it's a light fabric, I use white. Now on the pattern, there is a start and a stop point. We're going to start on one side, go all the way around the circle, and stop on the other side. I do not worry about back stitching, especially on this type of fabric. It's not unlike a more durable fabric. Sometimes I do back stitch, like in my last ears were Oogie Boogie ears, and that's with burlap, and those I do back stitch at the start and the stop. But this isn't going to be run through the washing machine, and we're also going to reinforce this with the hot glue and additional stitching when we close it. So I don't worry about back stitching. As for the circle shape, if you're a beginner sewer, this might seem a little daunting, or even if you're an intermediate sewer, because straight lines are much easier than curved lines. But this is, as far as Mickey ears go, like, so I have some that are like other shapes, like Winnie the Pooh's head. This one's an easy one because it's just a circle. It's all the same, like, radius all the way around, or like the same curve all the way around. So the biggest tips I have for you here are go slow with your sewing machine. I have not sped this footage up. This is as slow as I go with sewing, and really hold your fabric firm. You want to guide it through your sewing machine just like you would if you're sewing in a straight line. You're just gonna guide it and turn it as you go. You don't want to push and pull. You don't want to tug too much. You don't want to break your sewing needle by doing that. You're just working it and turning it as in, like, at the same speed as your sewing machine is going, just like you would with a straight line. It's just you're moving it. And I do like that this one, like I said, is just like one, like, full curve. You're not like doing different curves. So it is easier. It might seem daunting, but I promise you it's not. And also, it's also forgiving. Like, you're not meeting this up to anything else. If you get off of the pattern a little bit, it's completely fine. I do it. It's gonna be fine. They're Mickey ears. They're gonna be cute no matter what. So just be patient with yourself and go slow. Now that I'm done sewing, it is time to cut off the excess fabric. Obviously, I'm going to cut close to this line, but not super close. I don't want to cut it. I've also done that before, and that's really annoying because then you have a hole in your ears. And down here on this part where I haven't stitched it close, I do like leaving extra fabric because in a little while we will, that's what we're going to sew close. So I like having extra fabric on that end to work on. And also, like, if I leave a lot of fabric around the seam, it's just going to create more bulk. So I like getting it close enough, not too close that I'm like, I'm not going super, super slow with it either. It's not that complicated. It's not that difficult. So, yeah. Now we are going to turn the ears inside out, or right side out rather. I always say inside out. Technically, it is turning it right side out. So To do that, all you do is you're gonna flip the fabric inside out, right side out, there I go again, and work your finger along the seam to fully push out. You're turning out the seam, and then you'll obviously do that for both ears. Now we have our 2 ears to start with. We're gonna go ahead and grab our foam, the foam centerpieces, and like I said, I'm using 3 for each ear, and you just want to stuff them inside the ear. This is not complicated. The only thing to keep in mind is that you want to make sure that the bottoms of each of them line up, the curved part. Make sure there's not, you know, they should match. So just keep in mind that, and this is where you'll really see your ear start to form. And then after that, it's time for the polyfill. Now this really, like I said, again, same thing with the foam, it's personal preference, and the more you add, the more weight you will add to your ears. So just keep that in mind. Some ears that I do, I like to have fuller than others. There are also some designs that I've made that I don't do any polyfill, that I like kind of more of a flat look. So that's just, you know, personal preference. You can do them flat. If you are doing a flat one, you might need to add an extra foam or 2, because to basically, these foam centerpieces are smaller than the shape of the pattern and the line of your pattern. So because they're going to be filled out. So when there is no polyfill, when you're not using any polyfill, you might need to add another foam center in order to take the slack out of that fabric. And I don't know what happened with my footage there. It's gonna glitch out, I think, later on too. So just don't know what the camera's doing there. But moving on, I now am just threading a sewing needle with, again, black thread. And this is, now I'm gonna close the ears up. We've got them fully stuffed. Now they're ready to close up so that they can be added onto the headband. Now to close this up, this is why I said I like having, you know, excess fabric right there. In order to prevent it from bunching as much as possible, there will be some bunching depending on the fabric, especially cotton. It's a lot harder to fully pull it tight and eliminate any bunching. I like to stuff it on one side and then fold it over. Really, basically, like, make it as nice of a seam as possible, while the seam is not going to be seen at all. It's going to be attached to the headband. No one's going to see this part. When you take the 5 extra seconds it takes to make the seam nice and fully, you know, see, I kind of like pull it there to remove that extra bunching of the fabric. When you take those 5 seconds to do that, it just makes your ear that you do see, the fabric that you do see, it makes it a lot cleaner and nicer and more neat. So that's just what I like to do. You also could sew, or sorry, I'm sewing it obviously. You also could hot glue the ends closed. I like to stitch it just because it gives you, I don't know, it's just a nicer finished feel to the ear. I'm able to really get the seam well, if that makes sense. I feel like I'm just rambling now at this point. I'm sorry. But we are stitching it all the way closed and making sure, going all the way to the end and kind of finish off those little edges right there. And then I'll, of course, do the same for the other side. Tuck in the extra fabric, fold that side over, and then pull it flat and stitch along the edge. Now it's time to add the ears onto the headband. Because I have the battery pack, because I have the light, I'm gonna do it a little bit differently than I normally would. First, like always, I will start off with finding the center of the headband and kind of placing that down for myself on the center of my little grid right here. And then I will figure out which side of the ears I want to be facing forward, which I already kind of knew. I wanted these 2 sides. So just figuring out which side I want those two on. And now, usually when I place them, they're close right there, and that part will not hold this battery pack. So for these ears, I am going to start by gluing this battery pack to the middle of the headband. I also kind of turn it, as you can see, angle it a little bit. That way I can not take up as much room and make the ears closer together like they normally would be. Also, a big thing here, you see I'm gluing on this side. The other side is the side with those screw holes with the screws on the other side. That other side is where you would replace the battery if you ever needed to change that out. So I do not glue on that side. I glue on the other side. That way, obviously, if I were to ever want to replace the batteries, I could. Now that I have this centered and also glued down, I can now attach my ears and get them as close to the battery pack as I can and make sure that they're still lined up evenly. Next up, it is time for the flowers. Now for these, first of all, it's really easy to remove them from the stem. You can see right here, this little joint is where you pull and it'll just pop right off. Some are harder than others. The other one with the berries, that one is kind of a little bit harder. Now, when working with these flowers, what I like to do is remove all of the flowers that I might possibly want to use and sort of like block out what I'm going to be gluing. Because obviously right now I can play with it, they're not stuck to it, but this kind of gives me a direction of what looks good, what flowers I do want to use. Like I don't end up using the darker large ones, and also with the flowers, just kind of play with it. There's no right way to do it. It's just kind of whatever looks good to you. Be creative with it. You also could add in other flowers. You could add in the berries even if you wanted to. So really just play around with it. This is the configuration that I liked the best, and that's what I went with. Now, once you kind of know what you're going for with them, and it's time to glue them down, I like to place it and then kind of pay attention to where what part of this like stem bit is touching the headband. Because obviously, like, I don't need to load it up with a bunch of glue if it's not going to touch anything. So I like to, here I'm gonna add on basically everywhere that like was touching the headband, or also the fabric as well, the ear part. I also do want to keep in mind the placement of the little black switch. That is where it's the on and off switch. I do get it a little bit closer to the ears than I would have liked, but it's still reachable. And what I will end up doing later, which you'll see, is cutting a little bit of the petals off on the back. That way it's a little bit easier to reach that on and off switch. So I just go in one flower at a time and glue it down and play with it. This part is super easy. It does take a little bit of time, just kind of figuring out what you want to do with it, but this is one of my favorite parts of it. It's very fun to do. Also, like these, if you want to do this, don't wait. These orange flowers, like I said, right now it happens to be, it's July, the end of July. All of these are in stores right now, and they will continue to be in store for the next couple of months, but they do really get, they go in and out of stock. People do buy them all right now. I remember when we used to make these ears, when we used to sell them, we would go to Walmart during this, like, it's not even fall, it's still summer, but during the store's fall season, and buy as many of them as we could and stock up, because this is the best deal for also like the look and size of them. They have a bunch of different options, a bunch of different varieties. These ones weren't even the ones we used to use, but they have like so many different options. And so right now I would definitely, if you want to do this, go and buy some right now. Even if you're not going to make them right now at the moment, buy some to have. I believe I bought 2 of the bigger mum bushes and 2 of the berry ones. And that got me enough because I am going to do the flowers on the back of the ear. You certainly don't have to, but I do like it on the back as well. And it also does hide the battery pack. If you didn't do that, you would see the back of the battery pack, and that's perfectly fine if you don't mind that. Some people don't. Obviously, like I've said with everything else, the more flowers I am adding more bulk, more weight to the ears. So if you wanted to remove them from the back, you totally could. But yeah, I definitely just recommend going and buying some of these flowers now. They also carry them at the Dollar Tree around the fall time as well. So get them while they're in stores, because I know the ones on Amazon, they don't. I was never able to find ones that had like as much color as these ones, as much variation in the bushes themselves. Like they also, you know, the sizes are different and things like that. So, and for the money as well, like these are like 99 cents each for each bundle. So yeah, definitely go and buy them now. I remember we used to stock up on them as much as we could and then hope we had enough to last us months and months when they weren't in store. But it was always oh, they're back in stock now, let's go and hurry up. So yeah, fun times. Now, if you've seen my other videos, I do usually also add in some trim around like the base of the ears, where the ears meet the headbands. And I definitely could do that for this. I have. But the flowers cover most of it. And I also took the time to make sure my edges of the ears were really clean and basically I don't have anything to cover up. They are very full, you know, it's very covered by the flowers to begin with, and so I did not go in and add any trim, but you definitely could. In the past I have also used like a gold trim around it, which is really nice with this design overall. So you definitely could. I'm not using that on this. Just wanted to throw that out there in case you've followed along to my other tutorials. Usually I do that. In this case, I did not. Now, once I'm kind of happy with the flowers, I was trying to decide if I wanted that one there. I decided not to, but once I am kind of happy with them, I am going to cut off a few of these petals, like I mentioned, by the on and off switch. And now it's time to just wrap the lights through. I like to make sure the wire is like as far into the flowers as possible and just kind of go through the, like, these flowers already have so many like grooves and pattern, or like where the petals are, placements of the petals, so I like to go in between those. Now, one thing to also keep in mind as you are wrapping them around is these lights are like evenly spaced in between each other. So when you are wrapping it around the like same flower or the same distance, sometimes like the lights line up to where they're like end up being too close together, like they end up being on top of each other, and not as spread out amongst the petals as, you know, as you would like. So that's just something to keep in mind if that's happening. Like, I tend to pull it back and go a different route, you know, go through another flower first and then come back. That is just kind of one thing that's a little bit annoying, but is inevitable. It's just kind of what you have to work with. Obviously these are evenly spaced for a reason. So yeah, that's just something to keep in mind, and just kind of play with it. Go through them until you're happy. Make sure, what I like to also do is make sure I go through all of the like front flowers first, get those like as lit as I want them to be before I go and put flowers or put the lights on the back flowers, because while I do want the back flowers to light up as well, I'm not as concerned about them as the front ones. So basically I don't want to end up using a bunch of them on the back and then not having enough to get the front as perfect as I'd like it to be, as lit up and bright as I'd like it to be. So I get the front basically is good enough. I get it to where I'm happy with it, and then I'll go to the back, and if I have any left over, which I do in this case, I will in this case, then I move it back to the front. Or if you're like, that's enough lights, I don't want any more, you could also cut in between this at the end. You can cut off the last few if you'd like. If you're like, this cannot take any more lights, you could do that as well. So just play around with it and get it, the way you're happy with it. There's nothing, this part doesn't have to be perfect. You can play around with the flowers a lot, which is fun in I think it's fun. And there you have it. Now you have your own pair of Mickey ears. If you followed along, let me know in the comments, or if you're excited to try this yourself, let me know in the comments. Let me know how it turns out. And if you have any questions about any specific step, just let me know and I will be sure to answer them for you. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe, follow, hit the like button, all the things, and I'll see you in the next one.